Okay, I believe we are live. The cat's screaming at me. What are you screaming at me for? What are you screaming at me? Can you say hello? Okay, Mom, she doesn't want to. Okay, we're going to read philosophy. First, we start the music. All right. Okay. We are reading Moral Luck and Deviant Causation by Sara Bernstein. Today, we may be doing a lot of moral luck papers that I've been leaving for a while. I skimmed all of these, but it's time to actually read them. There is a tension in our moral thinking about the relationship between causation and moral responsibility. On the one hand, people are responsible only for what's in their control. On the other hand, people are responsible only for what they actually cause. But what people actually cause is in many ways not entirely in their control. In a famous pair of cases, two drunk drivers each head home from a bar. One drunk driver makes her way home safely, while the other drunk driver strikes and kills a pedestrian. Intuitively, the lucky agent is not responsible for her death, and the unlucky agent is responsible for her death. Given that both agents have the same intentions and perform the same actions, what makes the moral difference is the unlucky occurrence of a bad outcome in one case but not in the other. Such resultant moral luck, or luck involving how things turn out, is thought to challenge the idea that agents can be held responsible only for what's in their control. In case the resultant moral luck was out of an agent's control, is whether or not an outcome occurs. Okay, so I don't think I have most moral luck stuff in Hypernomicon, so it's time to start adding stuff. But, whoops, sorry, I just... Okay, but whether the outcome occurs is not the only thing that can be out of an agent's control. Consider a case of deviant causation, roughly a causal situation in which a particular planned outcome is brought about in an unplanned manner. That's an interesting way of talking about deviant causation. Suppose that assassin shoots a victim intending to kill him, but that shot misses. However, the shot startles a sleeping cassowary who then angrily mauls the victim to death. What's out of the causal control of the assassin is not just whether the unlucky event occurs, but the process by which the unlucky event is brought about. If the assassin had not shot, the victim would not have died. Nevertheless, the prevailing intuition is that the assassin is not fully morally culpable for victim's death. Given that it happens in such a strange way, the unlucky agent is responsible in the case of the drunk driver, but the assassin is not fully responsible in the case of the angry cassowary. This contrast between intuitions is an instance of a puzzling tension in our treatment of cases of moral luck. We seem to hold agents fully morally responsible for unlucky outcomes, but only partly morally responsible for unlucky outcomes, and with the causal processes occur differently than they intended. The intention represents a deeper inconsistency in our thinking about the relationship between causation and resultant moral luck generally. See also Sartoria 2012, who discusses multiple sources of resultant moral luck. Sartoria doesn't, however, argue for a tension between them. Luck seems to minimize responsibility in some cases, but not in others. That tension is the focus of this paper. Here's the plan. In section 2, I lay out the problem in detail, giving several more cases of the phenomenon. I discuss the apparent tension between intuitions about resultant moral luck and intuitions about deviant causation. I examine the prospects for explaining away the tension, also the possibility of a uniform approach to cases of the resultant moral luck. In section 3, I show how this tension sheds light on the difficulty of solving another well-known puzzle about causation and moral responsibility, that of the thirsty traveler. In what follows, I'll make a few assumptions for the sake of the argument. First, I'll assume there's such a thing as moral luck, that is, that luck can make a difference to the agent's moral responsibility for an outcome. Though this is a controversial matter, I'll assume, for example, that the drug driver who kills a pedestrian is more morally responsible than the drug driver who does not, even if they are blameworthy for poor intentions and bad actions. Here I disagree with moral internalists such as Curry, who argue that what matters for moral assessment is a person's inner state. Second, I'll assume that consequences stemming from actual causation place some role in moral responsibility for outcomes, even if that role turns out to be small. This means that moral responsibility is more than a matter of assessing a person's character or intentions at the time of a particular outcome, though those are also relevant. A person must, in some sense, be causally connected to an outcome in order to be held responsible for it. I'll also assume that emissions can be causes, and thus agents can be causally connected to outcomes by way of emissions. There's third, while I hope to stay as neutral as possible on what moral responsibility consists in this discussion, I'll assume that it amounts to blameworthiness and praiseworthiness. Moral luck. Distinguish between three elements of causal structure. 1, whether the effect occurs. 2, the causal process by which the outcome is brought about. And 3, the manner in which the effect occurs. This is slightly different than Sartoria's taxonomy of resultant luck, which she characterizes thus. First, agents may not fully control whether certain outcomes occur. Second, results in cases where those outcomes do in fact occur, agents may not still fully control whether their behavior results in those outcomes. Let me turn down the music a bit. And finally, in cases where the behavior does in fact result in those outcomes, agent may not fully control the way in which they do. Okay. Whether the effect occurs is a matter of the effects happening or not happening. For example, the occurrence of pedestrian death versus its non-occurrence. The causal process by which the outcome is brought about involves what exactly constitutes the causal process which leads to the outcome's occurrence. For example, the bullet causing the victim's death versus an angry cassowary. The manner in which the effect occurs concerns the particular way in which the relevant outcome happens. For example, death by bullet related versus cassowary-related injuries. There's another kind of causation resultant moral luck, proportionality luck, that I don't discuss here. Proportionality luck involves circumstances out of an agent's control, either increasing or decreasing agent proportion of moral responsibility for an outcome. See my 2017 for an extended discussion. What's that? Much attention has been paid to cases in which luck makes a difference to whether the effect occurs, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. Each element in the causal structure is out of the agent's control is subject to luck. In angry cassowary, among the things that are out of the control of the assassin is a second part of the causal structure, the particular means by which the outcome is brought about. Call this sort of situation causal process luck. I haven't really standardized in my glossary whether I use capitalized or non-capitalized. I think I like non. Causal process luck is Causal process luck is an additional kind of resultant moral luck at work in cases of deviant causation. Okay, let's put that in Hypernomicon. Whoops. It's additional because it occurs on top of the traditional resultant luck involving the outcome. In our case of deviant causation, it's very unlikely that the outcome occurs despite its circuitous causal route. The prevailing intuition in cases of deviant causation is that the initiating agent is not morally responsible for the outcome, even if she's morally responsible for some lesser act, such as the attempt to bring about the outcome. To help warm up to this idea, consider a few more cases. Careless driver. Galen plans to murder Julian with poison. As he's driving to buy materials for the poison, he fails to see a pedestrian. The pedestrian walkway. What happened to my music? Okay. And strikes and kills the pedestrian. Upon rushing out of the car, he realizes the pedestrian was Joey, an angry friend. Joey plans to murder Jake by poisoning his drink while preparing the poison. Joey is so nervous that he breaks a bottle of poison. Shortly thereafter, Jake slips on a bit of glass from a broken poison bottle and dies from the fall. In each of the cases, the agent initiates a causal process to bring about an intended outcome, but the intended outcome is brought about by means so different than those planned by the agent that the agent isn't responsible for the occurrence of the outcome. Deviance of the causal process from the agent's original intention reduces moral responsibility, and in some cases, legal responsibility for the outcome. See my deviant causation in the law for an extended discussion, blah, blah, blah. Luck enters the picture because something out of the agent's control, the particular nature of the causal process, downgrades culpability for the intended outcome to culpability for a mere attempt. One might initially be skeptical that initiators of deviant causal chain should count as causes of the relevant outcomes, but note that there's a counterfactual dependence between the outcome and the initiator of the deviant causal chain. In the case of the angry cassowary, the victim would not have been mauled to death had the agent not shot. Had the assassin not shot an angry friend, Jake would not have died had Joey not prepared the poison. Given the existence of counterfactual causation, even if transitivity failed generally, this is arguably not even a case where transitivity fails. Given the existence of counterfactual dependence, even if transitivity failed generally. I don't know what it means to say if transitivity failed generally. Don't know if it matters. Okay, I think I'm going to stop listening to music for now. No more music. Even if transitivity failed generally. Whatever. Arguably not a case where transitivity failed. So appealing to the failure of transitivity is not a good idea, at least in this case, if not more generally. Moreover, I don't understand. Moreover, there are no promising routes to denying the efficacy of deviant causes. The prospects for a principal distinction between deviant and non-deviant causation are bleak. Moreover, it's plausible that agents who initiate deviant causal chains feel something like agent regret. According to Bernard Williams, agent regret is a type of... Okay. Where do I put this down? Because I want to remember this. Where is it? What is going on? Copy. According to Bernard Williams, agent regret is a type of gut felt by an agent who causally but not morally responsible for an outcome. Williams' paradigmatic case of agent regret includes it. Let's put this also in agent regret in hypernomicon. I don't want to put agent regret in my, what's it called? My glossary, but I don't really understand how to put things in the glossary if they're already up here. I've been doing it, but whatever, I can do it later. Paradigmatic case of agent regret involves a truck driver who accidentally hits a child who dives in front of the vehicle. It's reasonable in this case for the truck driver to feel regret over what he has done, even though he's not at fault. Similarly, a non-malintentioned initiator of a deviant causal chain might regret what has occurred, despite being morally responsible, not being morally responsible for the outcome. Initiators of deviant causal chain are to be considered causes. Returning to the cases with which we began, I shall call drunk driver and angry causatory. As I suggested at the outset, the intuition that luck makes a moral difference is not stable across all cases of resultant luck. The drunk driver involves luck in whether the outcome occurs, and angry cassowary involves luck in how the outcome is brought about. Typically, the agents seem to be fully responsible in the former case, but not in the latter case. Similarly, with careless driver and angry friend, because the causal processes go awry, the agents are not fully responsible despite the occurrences of the attendant outcomes. The deviance of the causal process seems to supersede more typical considerations about luck and responsibility, namely that a person is still fully morally responsible for an outcome impacted by luck. Call this phenomenon tension. Specifically, there's a tension between a commitment to moral responsibility of the agent in the drunk driver case, but not in the case of the angry cassowary. Why? Because in both cases, an agent initiates a causal chain leading to particular outcomes. In both cases, it's bad luck the outcome occurs, but in only one case, angry cassowary is an element that's out of control of the agent. The nature of the causal process reduces moral responsibility at the outcome for some reason. Whether the outcome occurs seems to matter less than whether the causal process leading up to the outcome matches the agent's intention. Tension is puzzling because it reflects the unevenness with which luck impacts moral responsibility. In a traditional case of resultant luck, an agent is fully morally responsible for an outcome, even if it owes circumstances beyond her control. That the outcome is out of her control doesn't lessen moral responsibility, but when the causal process runs out of control, it reduces moral responsibility for an outcome, even if the intended outcome occurs. This tension raises a few challenges. One challenge is to explain why the inconsistency exists, why hold people fully responsible in one sort of case, but not the other. From whence does the moral exception arise? Another challenge is to try to resolve or eliminate the tension. Is it possible to systematize the treatment of resultant moral luck? I turn now to these topics. The natural first inclination is to explain away the tension by appealing to something special about the causal process, which amplifies its effects on moral responsibility. The rough idea is that there's a particular moral significance attached to the fit between the agent's intentions for a causal process and the way that process actually occurs. If the causal process deviates significantly from the agent's intentions for it, then it makes sense to decrease the agent's moral responsibility for the outcome. This idea comports with the epistemic requirement of moral responsibility, similar to foreseeability requirement of legal responsibility. If an agent can foresee the bizarre causal process leading to the outcome, then she isn't responsible for it, or at least less responsible for it. But this strategy proves difficult to defend. First, the outcome in each of the cases is foreseeable, and the agent's intentions line up with the relevant outcomes. Each agent intends to cause a victim's death. Shooting at someone, for example, brings with it a foreseeable risk that the person will die as a result of the shot. the outcome is foreseeable and the agent acts in order to bring about the outcome. Why impose the epistemic constraint of the causal process leading to the outcome? Second, drawing a principal distinction between deviant and non-deviant causal processes is extremely difficult. Good. That and happen on the column. Drawing a principal. What's there are mildly deviant causal processes that nonetheless don't minimize moral responsibility, as in the following case. Ricochet. Janetha searches Jordan, intending to kill him. The bullet ricochets off a nearby rock and kills Jordan. Here, the causal process does not occur in a way that Janetha intends. Nonetheless, the natural intuition is that Janetha is still morally responsible for Jordan's death, since the causal process is not so different than the one that Janetha intended. Deviance in the causal process isn't an automatic defeat of moral responsibility. It minimizes responsibility only in some cases. Locating the source of the moral exception in the nature of the causal process is an unpromising avenue for explaining away the tension. Rather than locate the moral exception in the deviance of the causal process, it might be tempting to hold that there's something about the occurrence of the intended outcome that renders it immune to the responsibility decreasing factors. The general idea is that when an outcome occurs in the way planned by the agent is responsible for it, but when it does not occur in the way planned, the agent is not responsible for it. Cassowary, for example, the victim's death occurs via cassowary mauling rather than the intended gunshot. The assassin is less culpable for his own plan death. Sense, we hold people responsible for outcomes when the intended outcomes occur as a result of their actions, but not when those outcomes don't occur. But there are several wrinkles. First wrinkle, in case of deviant causation, the intended outcome does occur. Sometimes the outcome even occurs via the intended mode. For example, lazy assassin. Becky's dispatched to kill victim. Becky shoots the victim but misses. The shot wakes up Bill, who is independently dispatched by a different assassination. Bill shoots the victim and kills him. Bill would have not have shot had Becky not awakened him. Had Becky not shot, victim would not have died. In this example, victim dies in the way that Becky intends via gunshot. It is called a process that occurs differently than she planned, not necessarily the outcome. The lesson can be generalized to other cases as well. In many of the examples in this paper of outcomes that occur differently than the intended, it's easy enough to cook up cases when the intended sort of outcome occurs. Second wrinkle, whether the particular planned outcome occurs is also subject to luck based on the modal fragility of the outcome. According to Dave Lewis, we should call it an event modally fragile if, or to the extent to David Lewis, we should call an event modally fragile if or to the extent that it could not have occurred at a different time or in a different manner. A fragile event has a rich essence. It has stringent conditions of occurrence. It's conceptually metaphysically unclear how modally fragile outcomes are in these cases, but the planned outcome occurs in a significantly different way than that planned by the agent. It might count as a different outcome entirely. The call careless driver, which Galen brings eventually his death by hitting her in a pedestrian path on the way to buying the poison. Here the location, time, and manner of death are very different than what Galen planned. So different that Galen is not to be held morally responsible for intentionally killing Julian, although he might be held responsible for some other lesser transgression involving behavior and negligence. But it's a matter of luck that the intended outcome occurred so differently than what he had planned that it counts as a distinct outcome. The susceptibility of modal fragile outcomes to luck is particularly problematic because there is thought to be a causal asymmetry between hasteners and delayers. The cats were freaking out a bit. That alarm you may have heard. What are hasteners and delayers? See Lewis and Mackey. When a hastener brings about a particular outcome sooner than it would have been brought about otherwise, the delayer puts off an outcome to a later time than would have otherwise occurred. Typically, hasteners are taken because of whereas delayers are not. Though for an argument that hasteners and delayers are causally symmetric, see Tuborg. For instance, antivenom. Drake is bitten by a scorpion and taken to hospital to receive antivenom. 5 hours after receiving the infusion, Drake dies from a reaction to the antivenom. If he had not died from the antivenom, he would have died from the scorpion bite a few hours later. Here, the infusion of antivenom hastens Drake's death. Intuitively, the infusion causes Drake's death, even though all it did in some cases speed up something that was already going to occur. In contrast, delayers are generally not taken to cause the breakup. For example, slow antivenom. Drake is bitten by a scorpion and taken to a hospital to receive antivenom. The antivenom slows the progression of scorpion venom. Drake dies 12 hours later than he would have without the antivenom. Intuitively, the antivenom doesn't cause Drake's death, it merely delays something that was going to happen in any case. It's merely lucky that the administration of the antivenom causes Drake to die later rather than sooner. Okay, many different causes hasten or delay their outcomes. If the outcomes are fragile, whether a particular outcome occurs is subject to luck with respect to when, where, and how it happens. Changing the nature of the outcomes might change the identity of the outcome entirely. Modal fragility undermines the attempt to explain away tension by appearing to the occurrence of the outcome as the most significant feature of the moral assessment, because whether a particularly modal fragile outcome occurs is also a matter of out of the agent's control. I tend to conclude that attempts to explain away tension are unpromising. Okay, let's put this in hypernomic. I agree with everything here. I don't know how much of this to put in hypernomic. We put this, I think we put tension in, and then we put these two responses. Okay, that's in there. But an even larger challenge lies in trying to resolve tension that is systematically treat all cases of resultant moral luck. I won't hazard such a solution here, but I will make a few pessimistic remarks about the prospects. I begin by noting that a systematizing moral treatment of resultant moral luck would require treating all cases coherently. For example, if agents are fairly morally responsible in cases involving resultant moral luck, then they are responsible in all such cases, not just some of them. Or if the involvement of resultant moral luck lessens moral responsibility, then it should do so in all cases. But such a systematic treatment would be too revisionary to be palatable. One would not want to hold that a drunk driver who kills a pedestrian is less responsible for the outcome because she's unlucky. Retaining a commitment to reduce moral responsibility in cases of deviant causation requires such a view. Alternatively, one might hold that agents who initiate deviant causal chains are fully responsible for the outcomes in those cases, such as drunk driver, because the pedestrian is fully responsible. Some might find the solution tempting, especially those who are antecedently drawn to full responsibility of agents in cases of deviant causation. But such a commitment would include the unpalatable result that agents be morally responsible for outcomes resulting from extremely deviant causal chains. For example, asbestos. Assassin aims to kill a victim by poisoning her. Assassin prepares a canteen full of poison, but the poison turns out to be inert. However, unbeknownst to assassin, the canteen is lined with asbestos. Victim drinks from the canteen for several years, eventually dying of the asbestos-related condition. Here, the nature of outcome and the causal process is extremely remote from the assassin's intentions, and a systematic treatment of resultant moral luck would require that the assassin be morally responsible for the outcome, nor does adding an epistemic constraint help, since cases can easily be generated in which a malintentioned agent brings about the foreseeable consequences of reactions in a way different than she intends. While die-hard consequentialists might see the appeal of blanket moral responsibility for intended outcomes, most others would be skittish about such an indiscriminate commitment to moral responsibility for outcomes. Though there's much to be said on the topic, I tentatively conclude that a systematic treatment of resultant moral luck looks unpromising. Cool. How do I put this in Hypernomicon? I think probably what I want is that she's giving two options here. One is you deny moral luck everywhere, the other is you accept it everywhere. And to both of those, I make the same response. Where's the cat? The cat left, I think. So I like position one, agents are fully responsible. Agents are not responsible. Okay, good. I feel good about that. The thirsty traveler. It creates a problem for systemic treatment of resultant moral lack. The idea that deviance in the causal process reduces moral responsibility is fruitful for understanding another well-known puzzle about causation and responsibility, the thirsty traveler. There are many versions of the case, but the basic one goes like this. Billy and Susie are independently dispatched assassins targeting thirsty traveler. Victim has a canteen full of water that she needs to drink for her survival. Attempt to kill thirsty traveler. Billy fills the canteen with poison that kills by dehydration. Susie, unaware of Billy's assassination attempt, steals the canteen and attempts to deprive victim of water. Victim goes to drink water from her canteen but can't find it, so she dies of dehydration. The case gives rise to both causal and moral puzzles. Causally, the contribution of both Billy and Susie seem to cancel each other out. But it'd be odd to hold that neither assassin causally contributed to victim's death. They both, in some sense, brought it about. It also seems wrong to hold one of the other assassins fully responsible. The first assassin who fills the canteen with poison would have been responsible for the death, had the second assassin not come along. But due to the second assassin's removal of the canteen, the first assassin isn't directly causally connected to victim's death. It also seems wrong to hold the second assassin fully responsible. Second assassin responsible for victim's death, since stealing a canteen that's already full of poison doesn't seem to directly contribute to victim's death. The case since variants have spawned myriad causal diagnoses. There's an argument to be made that thirsty traveler is a strange case of causal overdetermination. A causal overdetermination, there are multiple causes sufficient to bring about an outcome in roughly the same way. As when Billy and Susie threw a rock at a window and both rocks hit the window at the same time. That goes in hypernomic. The vegetable guy, I think, is outside yelling. Second time today. Both rocks at the window, either rock would be sufficient. In Thirsty Traveler, each assassin is causally sufficient for victims' deprivation of life-sustaining water, but there's also an argument to be made that Thirsty Traveler is a strange case of causal preemption, or which one cause preempts the other from bringing about the causal preemption goes in Hypernomicon too. I forgot to put a description. Overdetermination. For example, suppose that Billy and Susie each throw a rock to the window, but Billy's rock reaches the window and shatters it before Susie's rock can. Billy's rock is the preempting cause, Susie's rock is preempted from bringing about the outcome. In Thirsty Traveler, Susie's stealing canteen preempts Billy's poison from killing victim. There are more ultra-causal diagnoses on offer. Some have argued both assassins are collectively responsible. Others have argued that neither assassin is causally responsible. And Sartori argues that it's obtaining of a disjunctive fact, the stealing or substituting, that's the cause. The assassins collectively but not distributively bring about victim's death. She also suggests that settling the causal puzzle doesn't necessarily settle the moral puzzle. Sartori suggests that such cases exhibit a new form of moral look involving how many moral agents causally contribute to an outcome. Because with the natural non-human intervener, Susie is not responsible for victim's death, and traditional telling with the additional assassin, Susie is partly responsible. I won't argue for a comprehensive positive answer to the complex causal puzzle. Rather, I wish to use the results from preceding discussion to draw attention to a few underexplored features of the case. The first underexplored aspect of Thirsty Traveler is its inclusion of deviant causation. Something made noise. Victim's death occurs due to Billy and Susie's contributions, but it does not occur via the causal process planned by Billy or Susie. The fact that the causal structure is deviant explains another puzzling intuitions about the case. Firstly, the involvement of deviant causation explains why we seem uneasy calling both Billy and Susie fully morally responsible for the victim's death, even if the case is read as causal overdetermination. Even though the victim dies due to dehydration, it's neither dehydration via poison as planned by Susie, nor dehydration via deprivation of canteen water, planned by Billy, as in. Okay, as in deviant cases involving individual agents, a mismatch between the causal processes, each agent's respective intention reduces moral responsibility for the outcome. Consider an example of similar structure, the Thirsty Traveler. adapted from an actual legal case presented by Hart and Honore angry neighbors. Neighbors A and B are mad at neighbor C, who lives between them. Neighbor A sets a fire, hoping it'll destroy C's apartment. Neighbor B unleashes a flood from his pipes, hoping it'll destroy C's apartment. Neighbor B's flood puts out neighbor A's fire. However, neighbor C's apartment is ruined. Here, neither neighbor A nor B is fully responsible for the destruction of neighbor C's apartment due to deviance in a causal chain. Like Thirsty Traveler, there's a cancellation effect of sorts between the causes. That's not helpful. Another common intuition about Thirsty Traveler is that there is some sort of causal asymmetry between the two sets. It's hard to put a finger on exactly what it is. One hint draws to my earlier discussion of hasteners and delayers. According to one interpretation of the causal structure of the case, Susie stealing the canteen causes the death to happen later than it would have otherwise if she had not stolen the canteen. Billy's poison would have killed the victim sooner. That means two things. First, Susie stealing the canteen is a delayer, delays the death that otherwise could have occurred sooner. Second, Susie stealing the canteen is a preemptor, preempts Billy's poison for killing the victim. The strange combination of causal features, being a preemptor but also delayer, goes some of the way in explaining why we have difficulty diagnosing causal asymmetry in the case. Being a preemptor is often a signal of something that's caused a particular outcome, as when Billy's rock shatters the window before Susie's rock can reach it. Cases of causal preemption, also cases of multi-resultant moral luck. It's a matter of each agent's control, which cause ends up bring about the effect of which one is merely preempted. We tend to hold the preempting agent causally more responsible for the outcome. That preempted agent is lucky, the preempting agent is unlucky in Thirsty Traveler. This means we would hold Susie causally responsible for the Thirsty Traveler's death, since her stealing the canteen preempts Billy's poison from killing the victim. But the case is particularly strange because Susie stealing the canteen is also a delayer in addition to being a preemptor. Being a delayer is not generally taken to be a way of automatically counting as cause. That Susie stealing canteen delays the death models are causal intuitions a bit because we tend to think she's merely changed to death that's already going to occur by making it later. But she also cuts off the causal process from occurring. The death by poisoning, the causal asymmetry in this case can be chalked up to the strange combination of factors. The moral diagnosis of the case can be chalked up to deviant causation, since each agent initiates a causal process that eventuates an intended outcome, but not in the way intended. There is heretofore unexplored tension in our treatment of cases of moral luck. Luck reduces moral responsibility when a causal chain is deviant, but does not reduce moral responsibility when it's merely unlucky that the outcome occurs. Deviance, the causal process supersedes occurrence of the unlucky outcome in assessing agent's moral responsibility. This intuitive quirk generates an incoherence in the way we treat the case as a result of moral luck, but it does some valuable explanatory work with respect to other puzzles of causation and moral responsibility, including the Thirsty Traveler. There's still much investigation to be done. The more this paper says nothing. We have resolved nothing. It's not helpful.